Welcome back to News Talk and our conversation here on News Channel 8 with Maryland Congressman and U.S. Senate hopeful Chris Van Hollen. Congress, we appreciate, by the way, very much your time. There's so much going on. It's really fantastic to have you here. You're a supporter of Metro, but you've been very critical of the agency as well. We're coming up on a year since Richard Sarles, the former GM, announced that he'd be leaving. They had several months to find a replacement. They've had several months since. As I say, we're coming up on a year with either an outgoing top man or an interim. What's your sense of what the board needs to be doing, and do they have the sense of urgency you and your colleagues in the congressional delegation would like to see?
Well, clearly not the urgency that's needed to put somebody back at the top in charge, because accountability begins at the top, and you need to make sure that there's someone who you can hold fully responsible. Everybody needs to be doing their part to make Metro safe. But you need the quarterback. You need the person at the helm. And so this is way overdue in terms of filling that position. And we just saw the chief safety officer resign the other day. So Metro's got to get a grip on the situation and move forward. I mean, it was only by luck that in the last accident we didn't have people hurt or killed.
Is the Congress and the federal government is so dependent on Metro? So many people take the subway to work. Are these near daily issues hurting WMATA's image with your colleagues at a time when the fight for financial support is so intense?
Right. So this is the nation's metro system. This is the metro system that is in many ways the lifeblood of federal workers getting back and forth to do their job for the American people. And people are, losing some confidence, in fact, confidence in the management. And what I worry about is that you have Congress trying to actually cut back on the federal commitment to Metro. In fact, we know from the Republican budget right now that the House budget cuts $50 million, right? We have $150 million a year allotment. I worked very closely on a bipartisan basis with former Congressman Tom Davis, Steny Hoyer, and others to get that federal commitment to the Washington metro system. Now you see many of our colleagues cutting back on that. Now, cutting back those resources would do even more damage to Metro. The current problems are not, in my view, funding related. In other words, the safety lapses are not from lack of money. But cutbacks in federal resources to Metro would put us way behind. We already are behind. It put us even farther behind on our efforts to modernize and make sure that the safety measures are up to par.
I want to ask you about politics. This week, the second GOP presidential debate will air in prime time. If the numbers, the ratings from the first one are any indication, this week's will be devoured. I mean, there's a lot of interest, particularly in the hothouse Republican primary, and the emergence of Donald Trump as I think, surprise frontrunner with much more staying power than a lot of people would have thought. He and Ben Carson are running 1-2, and many have noted that they are the outsiders. They are the non-politicians in the race. Donald Trump says things that, and I've been around politicians since I was 16, and I don't know of a politician who I've known or have just simply observed who can get away with the things that Donald Trump, he doesn't just survive. His numbers go up.
Yeah.
How do you've been in office since 1990. How do you explain it?
Well, look, first of all, you're absolutely right. You couldn't turn on a television set in the month of August without it being the Donald Trump show. I mean, even when I tried to avoid it by going to different channels, you couldn't avoid it. Look, the media has decided to follow this because it's entertainment, and people are watching it because he says these outrageous things. And the reality is, in this day and age of the 10-second soundbite, he can make these outrageous proposals, and no one is taking the time to criticize him and push back. I mean, okay, we're gonna build a wall, and by the way, the government of Mexico is going to pay for it. Well, too bad we hadn't thought of that earlier. And or the Chinese government, we just got to put the screws down, and by the way, we'll be able to have a booming economy, and they'll pay for it. I mean, look, this kind of stuff is easy to say off the cuff, and what's happening is no one is there to push back, and the other members in the Republican primary are somehow afraid of him in many ways because they're afraid if they criticize him, they'll lose potential support in that base farther down the road.
Do you think that's about to change?
Look,
I totally, I mean, your analysis seems spot on to me. But I also can't help but wonder whether in about 48 hours from now, we're going to see something very different. Because what they've been trying to do with him or to him or whatever clearly hasn't worked. I have a feeling it's going to be a thumping of trumping.
It may be.
A Trump thump, something.
The question will be whether that just further feeds the frenzy and makes him like the guy to watch. Who knows? This is what happens when you have 16, 17. Look, Perry dropped out. I'm losing track of exactly how many are in. But as long as you have 17, when you're at 30% or wherever he is right now, you're still king of the hill. How they work that out is anybody's guess. And his staying power has already been much longer than people predict. But here's the thing. I mean, we're talking about this here, and this is just feeding the Trump frenzy.
Well, I will only ask you one more thing and then move on. Is he tapping into something when he talks in strong, bold, confident terms about winning, about deals, about making progress? Is he tapping into something that serves as a contrast with a cautious president with a gridlocked Capitol? I mean, is there more there than just the unusualness of it or the freak show aspect of it?
Well, look, I mean, people are obviously very impatient for change. I'm impatient for change. I mean, I've got a lot of bold economic policies that I've presented that would help address some very deep-seated economic issues. But just like, we're having, the Tea Party threatening to shut down the federal government, they haven't even allowed a vote on this. They haven't allowed a vote on common sense gun safety measures, even though 80% of the country is in favor of it. So the reality is a lot of the people who are supporting Trump are actually part of the problem right now. They are the Tea Party wing that is blocking progress. So it's a great contradiction. The people who are sort of feeding the Trump frenzy are some of the same people who, politically speaking, are causing stalemate in Congress.
And I think a lot of that has been lost. There was a bipartisan, I mean, so much of the talk right now is immigration, and Trump takes great credit for bringing immigration to the fore as an issue. And yet there was a bipartisan immigration bill, very tough bill, many would say, that came out of the Senate, passed the Senate. We know how tough it is to get anything through the Senate. And what was the vote again? Can you remind us? What was the vote in the House on that bill?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked, because we didn't have a vote, as you know. The Speaker of the House refused to even bring the bill up for a vote, refused to allow democracy to work its will. And you know why? Because he knew that if we voted, it would have passed, and we would have comprehensive immigration reform. It would have dealt with a lot of these issues. We had virtually every Democrat that was going to vote for it, and enough Republicans to put it over the top. But what would have happened? The Speaker would have lost his speakership. At least that's what he thought. And so, unfortunately, he put his personal political interests above the interests of the country, and I would argue above the interests of the Republican Party, because their fixation with going after immigrants and immigration reform is actually going to create lasting damage to them as a party.
The big political story on the Democratic side today is that Hillary Clinton's support among women is really plummeting. Do you think she can recover from whatever damage her apparent mishandling of the email crisis has caused?
I think she can. I think this is an example of, again, a real sort of obsession with one particular issue, which I think will get resolved. I mean, in the last month, Hillary Clinton has also proposed lots of far-reaching policy proposals on everything from higher education and college affordability to trying to clean up our totally broken campaign finance system. But no one's hearing about that. I mean, everyone's hearing either about the emails or Donald Trump. If we're going to be serious as a country in resolving these issues, we need to be serious about looking at these policy proposals. Maybe disagree with them, but at least let's debate them instead of debate some, buffoonery from Donald Trump.
You're running for the Senate seat being vacated by Barbara Mikulski. I know you're traveling across the state to a huge extent, you're running in the Democratic primary. As you talk with people at the supermarket or wherever, what's the number one issue they raise?
Two issues. One is, of course, the economy and being able to make a wage, get a paycheck that supports their family. We've had flat paychecks, flat wages in this country for way too long, which is why I put forward an economic plan to address that. People are working harder than ever, but they feel like they're on a treadmill, or sometimes falling behind. And the other is everyone wants to make sure their kids have a bright future, and that means really investing in education. Right from the start, early education. The federal government needs to make its commitment and fulfill its commitment on funding the federal share of K through 12 education. And then we've got to address the college affordability issue. The fact that you have $1.2+ trillion debt for college students is not just hurting the college students in their future, but it's hurting our entire economy.
And the fact that mortgage interest rates have been so low for so long, and most people who've had the opportunity to refinance into a really low interest loan have been able to do so, but apparently you can't do that with these student loans that are so great for individuals and for the economy.
Well, that's right, and that's why I'm part of an effort, part of a piece of legislation. Senator Elizabeth Warren and others, we've come together to introduce, and I'm a co-sponsor of that legislation. There's no reason, and look, and the banks, the big banks can actually, of course, they get huge, very favorable terms when it comes to their borrowing rates.
Are they fighting this because there's profit attached?
The banks are not fighting this right now. I worked very hard, and many others did too, to get the big banks out of the student loan business. That is a success story, but the debt is still there. We need to address that.
If you're wondering what Northern Virginia Congresswoman Barbara Comstock, the region's only Republican Congresswoman, thinks about the issues we've been discussing here today with Congressman Van Hollen, well, we are too. We've been working to get her in for some time. No luck so far, but we continue to work with her staff, and we hope she will do the show sometime soon. Congressman Chris Van Hollen, Democrat from Maryland, thanks very much for your time. Great having you here. Come back anytime.
It's great to be with you.
Good to see you, and thanks very much for your time. The hour's top stories and the midweek forecast. It's all next as we continue. And then what to expect when Pope Francis comes to Washington.